Olunaku olwaleero nga Mu7 akyali mu kaddu anoonya ekyokukola tannaba kukitegeera kubanga ebyenfuna by'eggwanga Uganda bidobonkanya oluvannyuma lwa World Bank okumuggyako ssente. Yeebuuza engeri gy'agenda okumalako ne gavumenti eno tannaba kubitegeera. Gavumenti emutabuseeko kubanga abazungu okuva lwe bamusalako obuyambi bamuggyeemu obwesige bwe yalimbanga n'ababbamu ensimbi tebakyazimuwa kubanga ensimbi ze bamuwa nga yalinga azikozesa bintu biyamba ye na famire ye naye nga tezigasa ggwanga lyattu Uganda. Awo n'akyalowooza pressure His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu gy'amutaddeko nga budde bwonna buli lwatunulamu alaba nga gavumenti egenda mugendako ate nga abadde akyawoomerwa entebe eno kubanga ebyokunyagulula mu ggwanga Uganda bye abadde akyalina bingi. Kati asula teyeebase buli lwagattagatta ebimuli ku mutwe bw'alowoozaamu nti Icc emulindiridde budde bwonna emwetaaga n'omutabani bamutwala ono takyafunira ddala ku mpeke ya tulo buli lwagatta ebintu ebyo ku mutwe gwe. Olunaku olwaleero akuliddemu bannamateeka ba His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ku misango egyawabibwa omwami Mu7 ne mutabani we mu Icc amanyikiddwa nga Bruce Afrani avuddeyo n'atangaaza ku nsonga z'omusango guno Wezituuse ne process gye bayitamu okuyita omwami Mu7 agende mu kkooti abinnyonnyole nga bwe bamuvunaana olw'okutulugunya bannayuganda, olw'okuttanga bannayuganda abatalina musango, olw'okuwambanga bannayuganda mu zidrone ate n'abasiba mu kkooti n'abawolezanga mu kkooti ez'amagye ng'ate bantu ba bulijjo. Ono agamba nti ensonga zino zitambula mpolampola naye bannayuganda babeere bagumu oluvannyuma lw'okubeera nti omusango wedde gwamala dda okufayiringibwa kaseera buseera mwami Mu7 alina kuba ayitibwa abitebye. Ono agamba nti Mu7 yayitibwa ne banne 24 kati nga be bantu 26 kubanga Mu7 mutabani we n'abo 24 abayitibwa ku binnyonnyola abazze nga balinyirira eddembe lya bannayuganda. Kigambibwa nti eggwanga lya Amerika naddala lyagala nnyo amawanga agagoberera enfuga ey'amateeka nga buli munnansi aba n'eddembe lye mu nsi eyo wabula ekitali wano mu Uganda ng'ate abantu abatula ne Mu7 be bakozesebwa okulinnyirira eddembe lya bannayuganda. Kyova olaba nti n'abo 24 abagattibwako bayitibwe nabo babinnyonnyole lwaki batulugunya eddembe ly'omuntu wa Uganda. Ono agamba nti n'abamu ku bannakibiina ba NRM abali mu mawanga ag'abazungu nga badduka e Uganda nabo basaana bakwatibwe bannyonnyole ensonga lwaki baava mu ggwanga Uganda libakuutira akadingidi nti ddungi nnyo kubanga bano bwe bakozesebwa okulya ensimbi z'omuwi w'omusolo bagende basiga ekifaananyi kya mwami Mu7 nti kirungi nnyo kyokka nga ensimbi ze balya munnayuganda asigala talina kyaganyuddwamu ate bo ne basiiga ekifaananyi okusigala nga munnayuganda alinnyibwa ku nfeete nga talinaako ayamba. Kitegeeza nti ebweru gye bali basasulwa ensimbi nnyingi nnyo okuva mu gavumenti ya mwami Mu7 era nga baagala nabo basooke bakwatibwe bannyonnyole ensonga lwaki badduka ewaka ate nga babeera eri mbazungu bwe batembeeta nti ewaka walungi nnyo emirembe gyegiri. Ono ayogedde ne ku nsonga ya poliisi ya Uganda oluvannyuma lw'okuweereza His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ekibaluwa nga bamusitoopinga okuddamu okutambula entambula ze za datalaaga eggwanga lyattu erya Uganda. Agamba nti ekintu ekyo kiba kimenya mateeka era ne poliisi nayo bwe kinaba kyetaagisizza akulira poliisi aba alina okuvunaanibwa lwaki agaana omuntu okutambula eggwanga Uganda ng'ate ekibiina kye eky'ebyobufuzi kyakulembera kiwandiise mu mateeka. Okutambula eggwanga okwebuuza ku balonzi bo ssemateeka bw'abanga ddala akikkiriza lwaki bo bamuwa ebbaluwa emugaana okutambula mu ggwanga Uganda ng'ate bwe kituuka ku bali mu gavumenti bo batambula teri abakubye ku mukono. Ng'agamba nti singa basooka ne bakwata ebbaluwa ezo ne baziwa abakulembera eggwanga lino nti temukkirizibwa kutambula mujja kuba mumenye mateeka. Awo kyandibadde kya bwenkanya ne tumanya nti ne His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu bamugaana lwa nsonga yakuba nti ne Mu7 ne mutabani we tebakkirizibwa kutambula naye bwe baba nga beekubidde sayidi emu nti ono gwe batakkiriza kutambula n'agamba ekyo kijja kuba kimenya mateeka era bwe kinaaba nga omusango gusobodde okuwaabirwa akulira poliisi y'e Uganda naye aba asobola okuvunaanibwa mu mateeka.
So they only say we're going to stop it after it ended. They were afraid while it was going on to stop it. Now you all saw those huge crowds, 20,000 at minimum, sometimes 50 or 100,000 people. Entire towns were filled with people, stadiums. The government no longer will dare to use violence against those people. Because if they kill people, if they gun them down, if they're beating them in front of cameras, then the Icc will indict. And so the government is now understanding it can no longer use raw, naked violence against these people who come to hear Bobi Wine. And the government knows that, and that's why they announced they're stopping the tour only on the last day, after it's all over. So they're trying now to come up with excuses why not to let Bobi go again on tour. but they're making up stories that are very weak. They're saying, well, towns were crowded, stores had to close, there were traffic accidents. These aren't the statements of a government that thinks it's all powerful anymore. These are the statements of a government looking to make excuses. So it remains to be seen whether they're going to be able to stop a future tour. What are they going to do when these tens of thousands of people come out to see Bobby? They can't gun them down, and the soldiers won't do that anymore. They can't beat them up with sticks in front of cameras, because then they'll be indicted. So now the government is in a tough position. It can't really block these protests. If it does, the officials in the government get indicted. So they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. This is the force of law. Law, even the threat of law, makes governments behave better.
The way you are putting it out, it's like your cameras and lenses are still squarely focused on Mu7. Isn't the 215 evidence enough? You seem like you need more evidence in order to, back up the case. Is it the case?
Well, I think that we have enough evidence to make the International Criminal Court say there is a case here to investigate. Remember, our job at this early stage in the case is only to show the court there's enough here that the court should come in and investigate. Then the court will do its own inquiry. So our job is only to give the court a taste of what's out there, to show the court that there's enough that has happened, enough torture, enough brutalization, that the court should launch the investigation. I think we've shown enough for that. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think we've done more than most cases do when they first come to the ICC. But remember, JB, it takes the court time. All judicial processes take time, and the court's going to take many months to go over this evidence. But in that time, the government now has to behave itself, because if it uses violence and torture in public, at least, and guns people down or beats them in protest, then the court is absolutely going to act. So the government now has to be on its best behavior. Now we're seeing the results. People are no longer afraid to come out. Look at all those huge crowds that were no longer scared. They were no longer General Mu7. This tells us what the rule of law can do. And I think people in the government also, in the NRM, are starting to understand that all of this violence has to come to an end. That this way of running Uganda is old and has to change. And so I think we've made a lot of progress. Those huge rallies are a sign of that.
Having talked about the 215 that they are enough to make the case, the last time we were here, actually after the show, very many Ugandans were actually in need to know how safe is this evidence, these affidavits at the ICC.
JB, let me say this. The International Criminal Court takes very seriously the need to keep things confidential and to keep them secret. When someone signs an affidavit to the court, that does not ever get disclosed by the court. And in any communications, the court uses a code to deal with these affidavits. When a person signs a statement to the International Criminal Court, that statement is secret, it is confidential. The one guiding principle that the court has is absolute privacy. People are free to communicate to the court, and it will never disclose that information to the government of Uganda. That is an absolute. And everything you send to the court is safe. And let me tell you this, if people send statements to us, to the NUP, to me directly in America through the email, those statements are also safe. We will safeguard those, and when we send them to the ICC, they are kept secret, and there's only a code used publicly. No name and no location and no house is ever disclosed publicly. So JB, I will say to the people of Uganda, the ICC is a safe place. And if you have something to tell them or tell us, you should feel free to send it. And I can even give my email address if you'd like, for people to send to if you'd like me to.
Actually, I wanted to ask you that if there is an official link or a platform, because I believe very many concerned Ugandans would love to submit in more evidence. Please, you can go ahead and read it out. I'll also type it down in the comment section so that they can copy it and share it among themselves.
Okay, well, you can always write to the NUP and go to any NUP office or NUP person. You could also write to me at bruceafran@icloud.com. And that's my name, BRUCEAFRAN@icloud.com. And if you have a story of torture and abuse, we want to know. And we will then make sure that the right people come to you, and we put that together in a witness statement. So that's one address people could use. They could write to me at bruceafran@icloud.com, and we will forward that to the team. And we have a confidential system, and we have people outside of Uganda who can put together the documents. So it is a very safe system.
Thank you very much for that, because very many people were asking me about that. And I'm asking this on behalf of human rights defenders, activists, organizations, non-government organizations, and all that. What is the process of initiating a case at ICC? What does one need to go through, the steps, and maybe if you can expound more on the type of evidence and how to file it? I believe there are concerned Ugandans who would love also to drag the same people or other individuals to the International Criminal Court, because the courts back home, of course, you know the story.
Yes. Well, JB, that's the first test. Can the courts back home handle these cases? If the answer to that is no, then the ICC can step in. So that's the first step we use to show the court. We show the court that there is no real due process anymore in Uganda because the government controls the courts and threatens the judges. Now, in the ordinary case in Uganda, sure, the courts work, hopefully. But in a political case of torture, they don't work because the judges are often too afraid. And so what happens is people are charged, the judges want to release them, and sometimes do, but then they're immediately put into the military courts. So they never get out. They can stay in for a year or two at a time, never get a court date. We've shown all this to the ICC. And this is the first step, showing the ICC that the Uganda courts can't work, that there's no due process in Uganda for those who are arrested and abused and tortured or charged with political offenses. That's number one. The next step we have to do is show the court that things such as torture, humiliation, degradation, abusive conduct are taking place. Because those are the things the court looks at. It doesn't look at ordinary crime. If two people get in a fight, even over politics, and one hits the other and injures them, the ICC doesn't get into that. What the ICC looks at is violations of human rights law, of the law of nations. Do we torture people and degrade them? Do we put them through pain and suffering in a prison or in a court? Do people get beaten because of their ethnicity or their politics or their religion? Do people get killed without ever even reaching a courtroom? Do women get abused? We had one person who wrote about how her uterus was destroyed by the abuse of the police, and who literally grabbed her by her private parts when she was pregnant. She lost her baby and her uterus was lost. This is an example of degrading and humiliating treatment. People have been electrocuted in prison when they urinate. People are constantly whipped with wires. They're forced to dance 12, 20 hours in a row and are beaten if they fall down. All of this is forms of abuse. People have had flesh pulled out, fingers pulled out. All of this falls under the ICC. So we need to show them not only do the courts not work, but that these tortures are occurring. And once we've done that, we've done the basic job. But you have to have the evidence, and you have to be able to truly put it together in witness statements so the ICC can see it. And it's not enough to just say, and I don't mean to diminish anybody, to say I was arrested and raped. We have to have a description of when this occurred, what organization took them into custody, describe the details of what happened. It's not enough to say I was tortured. We need to know, how were you tortured? Did you have flesh pulled out? Did you have chemicals put in your eyes? Were you forced to breathe gases? Were you forced to dance for 12 hours at a time? Were you whipped? We need to know exactly what happened. That's what the court needs. It needs this detail. And that's what we need people to tell us. So go to your NUP person, send an email, as I've said, and we can at least start that and send more information to the court. The more we send to the court, the greater the chance they'll take the case.
Oh, you expounded it very well. Bruce, you well know that it's no longer news that Mu7 is a dictator who actually captured power in 1986, and up to date, he's still clinging on to power, of course, ruling Ugandans at gunpoint. But this gentleman still enjoys recognition on the international stage. He still moves around Russia and all those other countries. What more can Ugandans do to prevent him from enjoying that space? Is there any strategies that you can give out to concerned citizens on that matter?
Yes, I can, JB. First, I want to say this. Mu7's ability to move around is very limited. He can go to Russia with very little rule of law. He could go to China where there's no rule of law. He might go to Iran, which is a dictatorship, but he can't go to any democratic countries. He might go next door to Kenya, but that's about it. He's not welcome in democratic countries. All he can do is travel to dictatorships. So he doesn't really have that much freedom. He may make a big deal of going to Russia, but Russia itself is under indictment, or Putin was, by the ICC. It's not a legitimate place anymore in the world. So Mu7's ability to be in the world is very limited. He has lost all of that international respect he once had. You know, there was a meeting of African leaders. He got exactly 10 seconds in a picture with Biden. That's all they'll ever get. That's all they'll ever get. Remember, this is the same man who was in the White House with President Reagan. Today, Mu7 will never get anything more than a 5-second photo. And so his ability to move in the world is limited, and the respect is held and is very low. Only fellow dictators will welcome him.